Welcome to the Scrum.org Community Podcast, a podcast from the home of Scrum. In this podcast, we feature professional Scrum trainers and other Scrum practitioners sharing their stories and experiences to help learn from the experience of others. We hope you enjoy this episode.
Hello and welcome to the Scrum.org Community Podcast. I'm your host, Dave West, CEO here at Scrum.org. Today's podcast is in the Scrum Master Real Talk series. It's a special series where we want to hear from Scrum Masters sharing personal stories, whether it's overcoming obstacles, creating solutions, or critical lessons they've learned during their journey. How have they helped and foster agility in their teams they've worked with and the organizations? Today, we're incredibly lucky to have Jim Sparks from Dayton, Ohio, in the United States of America. Welcome to the podcast, Jim.
Thank you very much. It's actually a pleasure to be here.
Great. Well, you should hold that judgment until the end, Jim. But
Being optimistic, right?
First job of every Scrum Master, be an optimist, I think. Great. So, all right, let's start at the very beginning. How did you become a Scrum Master?
It was actually very accidental. For a little while, I would call myself an accidental agilist because I was a data guy working in Teradata, SQL Server, that type of thing. And the team I was starting to work with, the Scrum Master, was very busy. At the time, I didn't know any better, but I come to find out he was doing a lot of things that at the time you didn't typically expect a Scrum Master to do. So I just started volunteering. I'm like, hey, I can help you with that. Let me help you with that. How about I help you with that? And after about 4 to 6 weeks, he just kind of checked that and let me go. He just kind of said, here, you do it. And he provided oversight and training and helped me, learn as we were going. But he let me take the reins of that team and that working on that product. So it was pretty awesome. At that point, I started to learn as much as I could. I started to absorb knowledge, read books, reading, the blog articles, watching videos, a lot of Scrum.org trainers. Actually, I was trying to learn from to get better at it because I really fell in love with what I was doing. And the biggest reason I really resonated with me was the servant leadership aspect of it. That was kind of my personality. It's who I was. It's what I am, and my DNA is, a servant leader at heart. And I'd never really heard of the term servant leader until I started down the Scrum Master path. And then I was like, whoa, someone wants to pay me to do what I already do anyway. So for me, it was a no-brainer at the time. So I jumped into it with full force, and kind of led me to here. So I've been through 7.5-ish years doing this, and I love everything about it. I've learned, different industries, different types of work, been in benefits and compensation, HR, cybersecurity, medical device industry, a lot of different industries, finances. And so you get to see a little bit of differences in how people apply Scrum and agility in general based on where they work. So it's kind of fun. It's been a lot of fun for me. It's been a fun journey.
So when you first got into the job, as it were, took over the accountabilities incrementally, slowly from the Scrum Master and your team working in data. Compare how you thought the job was then to what you think of it now. What did you initially think you were getting into?
Um, it's completely different. I will say that from then to now. And for me, it went from a kind of an arc where I had these expectations of what it would be, the servant leadership aspect of it, working in the shadows. I've called it that for years, working in the shadows. The goal is always of a good Scrum Master, at least it was when I first started, was to fire yourself, to really get your team to the point that they're completely self-organized and they can really run without you there. And that's what I thought it was. I was like, this is great because I get to help them achieve their version of success and, maybe slink into the corner and go off and do that with another team. And then through the course of my journey, I found out there's, a lot more involved to it than just, kind of slinking away into a corner in servant leadership. And as I started to grow and learn about delivery and learn about how you can impact delivery of a product from, your position as a Scrum Master was a lot of fun. And now, kind of going on the other end of it, I feel as if it's shifting more focus towards the delivery aspect of it, as it should, because you're supporting a team that ultimately they're there to deliver. So if you can enable that and enable their success in that delivery of that product, yes, you can still be a great servant leader. Yes, you can still, be the person that is everyone looks to and everyone relies on and counts on to help them. But you also have to be able to focus on, how do I deliver this product for my organization? Which I think back then it wasn't quite as focused on that, the accountability of Scrum Master itself, as it is now. So I actually love the shift in the way it's going.
That's interesting, because obviously the Scrum Guide, we in the 2020 release of the Scrum Guide, we made the changes. Well, Ken and Jeff made the changes to make the Scrum Master, the whole Scrum team, accountable for delivering value, and really tighten that up a little bit,
Mhm.
to make it a lot clearer that your focus is ultimately, well, everybody's focus is to deliver value, and how you do it is focusing on the accountability, servant leadership, serving the team, serving the organization, serving the product owner, obviously, and helping them be successful. So you must have been a little bit annoyed, Jim, when they took the phrase servant leadership out of the Scrum Guide in 2020. Must have, as you are natural, but don't worry, it's still kind of conceptually there. We just took that phrase out to sort of tone down the servant element and emphasize the leadership element.
Mhm. And I think that was good, actually, because I believe that any good, great leader is going to have some aspect of that servant
Yeah, yeah,
leadership as part of their leadership tool belt, so to speak. So the wording to me wasn't, it really didn't phase me a bit, because as a leader, that's just who I am. I am a servant leader,
yeah,
so
yeah.
that that's just kind of my personality when it comes to that. So I think any good leader should have some aspect of that.
Yeah, yeah, and the reason, the motivation was to reduce the emphasis on sort of like being a team, a person basically getting the coffees in, making
Oh
sure
yeah.
that all the things, because though those things are important, I actually, sitting here at my desk, I would love somebody to go and get me a cup of coffee at the moment, but those, where's my Scrum Master? Sorry. Anyway, the thing is that isn't the focus. As what you described is exactly right, Jim. The emphasis is to deliver an amazing product and create an environment for your team to do that. And that is the important stuff. And if you go and get your own coffee, which is a little bit disappointing this afternoon for me, but that's cool. All right, so you sort of fell into Scrum Master. It sort
Mhm.
of fitted your skills, your style, your what value you want to bring to the world, as it were. You said you were working in Dayton. You worked in a lot of different kinds of organizations. Can you take me
Mhm.
through some of those for a moment?
So when I started, I was a full time employee with a consultancy agency, but 85% of the work we did was for the U.S. government. So we had a lot of government experience, a lot of working in that environment. Everyone knows that sometimes there can be a little more red tape involved. It can be a little more, a little more constricting about how you do. So I think that for me was a great experience to learn my role, to learn the accountability of a scrum master, to learn how to be a great scrum master, because you had a lot of obstacles. You had a lot of impediments that are not going to be easy to tackle, and so working with that group and working with that team to deliver that was awesome. Moving from there into like web application and developing mobile apps, working with those teams, working with a medical devices industry. We were going to IoT, the Internet of
Oh, okay.
Things. Everything's going to be connected. And we had at the time, we were kind of given almost free reign. We had, oversight. We had our directors were in there, but we were given the run of, here is this thing, that here's this Scrum, go take this and create these products. And the teams are awesome. They really thrived in that environment. So I got to see that. I've been through some HR, benefits, compensation teams. Been through a finances team. It was funny there. I went in as a new Scrum Master, and the first thing the team manager or the development manager said to me wasn't "Hi, hello, how are you?" It was, "We don't do Scrum around here." First thing he said. I was like, "Oh,
You're like, welcome to
okay."
the team.
So my response, being who I am, like, awesome. Why? Because that's my typical response. I'm a 5-year-old, so I'll be like, "Hey, why?" Well, tell me why. Tell me more. Tell me why. And so that was an adventure. Currently working in a cybersecurity space right now, so that's fun for me. It's interesting to see how we can use, agile, in Scrum within a cyber environment. Because a lot of people don't think, well, you can't do Scrum in cyber. Well, you can. It's challenging, but it can be done. So that's, for me, is a lot of fun right now. That's what my biggest challenge right now is making sure they get it.
So take you back to that. You went into the organization and they said, we don't do Scrum. Welcome to the team. So you said why. You then unpacked what he meant by not doing Scrum. And then what did you do next? Did you just sort of, okay, so what are you trying to do? What's the outcomes you're achieving? What was what was your natural response to that, Jim?
I wanted to sit down and talk to the manager, who obviously everyone looked up to, and the organization was supportive of agility and supportive of Scrum. It's just this pocket, this team was like, we don't do Scrum, and so I wanted to kind of understand what their concerns were and why. If the organization believes in Scrum, the organization is supportive of Scrum, why is this pocket of it not a fan of it? Why are they not implementing it either correctly or at all? So talk to him for a little bit, and they had experienced, the, I guess you could say, the Scrum Master that comes in and says you have to Scrum by the book, every single letter, and not giving any flexibility for the team to really grow into it and learn how to do it well. It was a very P's and Q's. Your time boxes are on the dot, and that it just they took it a little too far. So they had experienced some of that, and it didn't work for them. And maybe that's why there wasn't a Scrum Master on that team at the time. I don't know, but so we started to develop the relationship where, a very collaborative relationship, just explaining the value, what you can see, and start to fine tune some of the anti patterns that were there, and get them to where they were at least comfortable saying, yeah, we do Scrum.
Yeah. And I think that sometimes some of those people can actually ultimately become the biggest advocates. I was working with CRISPR Therapeutics, and the person that was doing Scrum, the Scrum Master, was awfully bought in. He was really positive.
Hmm.
And then he got moved into something else, and he brought this other guy who was PhD, but was also an ex-fireman, and he was so cynical, and it was just hilarious. And now we meet for dinner once a quarter. He's like the biggest advocate. He's gone into a different role in a different organization, but he brings all of those practices. He's become the biggest advocate. So sometimes those situations aren't necessarily the worst. Did you get them? Did you in the end get them doing at least something that looked a little bit like Scrum?
Yes. For me, the biggest win was when we went into our daily Scrum. People were actually communicating and
Yeah.
collaborating, and they were using it for what it was intended for, and they were actually turning their cameras on. So that for me was a win. I went in and I faced, when you go into a room,
Yeah.
virtual room, and you face a wall of boxes with just a little bubble of each person in there versus and they were actually communicating and talking, and so that was a win. That was huge. But yes, they were headed down that path.
That's awesome. That's good. You never know. One day, one of them might be on a call like this. All right.
Um,
So you've had a varied sort of over this 7.5 years of a varied set of experiences around Scrum. What would you say the biggest challenge you've faced as a Scrum Master? Was it the "we don't do no damn Scrum," or was it the that was me trying to do an American accent. I do apologize for you and our listeners. That was awful. I've lived here 23, well, no, 24 years, and I still can't do it. That's almost 25 years. Anyway, so sorry about that. We aren't doing any Scrum, or is it something, something else? Tell me a little bit about some of the challenges that you've faced.
I think for me, one of the biggest challenges is that leading without authority. And one
Mm,
of the kind of the way, at least the way I've noticed the industry leading a little bit is, having a scrum master or having a manager of some sort take on the accountability of a scrum master because they have some authority.
mm.
Whether I don't know that I'm 100% on board with that yet or not. I'm still kind of, you know, the jury's still out. But I think that the leading without authority tends to be the biggest challenge for me because you go into an organization or a team where they're holding on to the old anti patterns that have caused them, heartburn. And you don't have the authority to come in and just say, okay, we're going to stop all of that craziness right now. And we're going to try something like this.
Mm.
So I would do that. Like, hey, let's try something new, but I don't have the authority to say, we're done with that. So you have to be able to experience the team where they are. You have to get in there and meet them, collaborate with them, build that rapport so that they want to follow you, create that value, create that vision of why you're headed this direction to really pull them along with you. Whereas if you are a manager or you're trying to push them. So I think that's been the biggest challenge for me is to kind of pull them with me versus having the authority to push them a direction.
Yeah, I mean, I'm 100%. I believe that Scrum Masters ultimately have to have the authority. And the reason why is exactly the story that you described. The most powerful situations are, change situations I've ever encountered are ones when the person, the boss says, okay, we're not going to do that anymore then. We're going to do this. And if it doesn't work, we're going to learn from it, but we're going to try. And those situations are very hard to do when you have to. And I know you can persuade everybody and you can influence and all this stuff,
Right.
but impediments, and it doesn't have to be as big as that. It could be just one small impediment. When the team themselves have not got the ability to remove an impediment, and it's obvious that it needs to be removed, then and you not having that authority is incredibly disappointing, and really illustrates what the organization thinks of Scrum. Yeah, they trust Scrum, but only to some extent. They've still got the original, hierarchical managers in place. So I'm a big fan of having authority. I don't believe it reduces transparency. I mean, it's a risk, but I think it's a risk that can be easily managed. And I ultimately think that it also, I hate to say it, but it allows you to get paid appropriately. It allows, all of those, all of those things happen as well. Big fan of that. Um, and it is very challenging to overcome. So all right, so we're moving towards the end. We try to keep these brief. And Jim, I could ask you questions all day. I'm sure you've got lots of insights. But all right, so I'm a Scrum Master listening to this, and maybe I'm new to the role. What advice would you give me?
The two pieces of advice I think that there are things that have helped me the most along my career so far is one, never stop learning. Whether you read, whether you're watching a video, whether you're listening to a podcast, whether you're taking a course, whatever it is, always have that relentless desire to learn and get better and perfect your craft and realize that you're never done. Don't ever get to the I'm there, I've made it point because you've never made it. And you never will make it. So keep that in mind. Learn as you go. Try to get better. And the other piece I would offer is build your network. And this is somewhat related to what we just talked about. And while you don't have the authority to go out there and maybe put your foot in the ground and say, this is how it is, if you build your network and you've built that rapport and you have people that trust you, that have that authority and can put that flag in the ground and say, this is the way, and you have some element of influence with them, that helps you along your journey. So don't be afraid to go external to your team, go outside of your team and build that network. That is how you're really going to be able to support your teams and enable them to run.
Oh wow, that's bizarre that you picked those two because they're exactly the two I would always say. I think that the learning aspect is really interesting and continuous. I personally, but I make sure my lunch hours are always blocked out. And yes, I do eat, but I don't eat for the whole hour. I'm not having a 5 course meal and wine. If only I'm not in France or Europe.
I know.
Unfortunately, I wish. Anyway, but I have my 5 course meal. No, I just have my sandwich or whatever, and then I spend the other time learning, and I have a backlog. I know it's very geeky of things that have tickled my fancy, that I've seen but not had time for. Like, oh, there's this article on, flow systems or flow
Mhm.
networks or whatever. I'm interested in that. Oh, I need to really spend some more time in Cynefin and Dave Snowden's work or whatever it is. And I have this big list that I add to continuously. It's an Evernote. And then I just literally, oh, I can see your list on the wall. And then so I pick every lunch. I read something or I listen to something or whatever to actually to do that. So I really really appreciate that. And then the network thing is, I mean, that's the reason why Ken Schwaber was my mentor, right? And for 20 years we met for not every month, but we met sometimes very frequently and sometimes less frequent. And he helped me, build an engineering organization at TaskTop. He helped me, at Forrester Research when I was researching this stuff. And then it turns out that he wanted to hire me. But so networks are invaluable throughout. So, and as a Scrum Master, particularly in your enablement role, I think it's even more crucial. So, great
Agreed.
advice. Great advice
Thank
there,
you.
there, Jim. So, thank you for spending the time today. I really, really do appreciate. I think our listeners do as well. If there's any last words, like to share any last words with our listeners.
Go out there and just do it. Don't just get off your high horse as a scrum master and just, be open to learn and just have fun doing it. That's the biggest thing. Go have fun doing this.
Oh, that is such good. What you said about that bad experience with Scrum. There's so many that team had, and then you had to sort of slowly bring them back. The bad experiences are often created by arrogance and hubris, right?
Oh
We
yeah.
think we know it all because, I mean, and the reality is you really don't. And nobody does. That is the reality. There's no such thing as a truth, but its pursuit is honorable. um and I think that is, oh my gosh, that's perhaps the third bit of advice. Don't be arrogant, I guess.
Hmm.
Cool.
Absolutely. Yeah. Get off your high horse and realize no matter how much you think you don't know it all, and you need to be willing to take that step back.
Definitely. I think that's really really good advice. Well, thanks, Jim.
No, I
um
appreciate you. This has been fun.
This certainly has. So today I was very lucky to be speaking with Jim Sparks from Dayton, Ohio, a Scrum Master for some 7.5 years, worked all over the place, helping teams become more and more effective. And thank you for listening to today's podcast, Scrum.org community podcast. If you liked what you heard, subscribe, share with your friends, and of course, come back and listen to more. Today we were hearing all about Scrum, the accountability of Scrum Master. But I'm lucky enough to have a variety of guests talking about everything in the area of professional Scrum, product thinking, and of course, Agile. Thanks, everybody. Scrum on.